So there's a chapter in Power of Awareness called Self-Impotence. In my last video, I spoke about acceptance and how we must accept things within ourselves. But I noticed in my own life that I had a hard time accepting things within me. And I started to wonder why I had such a difficult time. And I came to the conclusion that it was reason. Reason was my issue. I would reason my way out of accepting things, always. I'd come up with, and that's really all this is that that's really your enemy inside your own mind. It's yourself, but it's reason. It's the voice of reason. It convinces you to go back to where you just were from, right? Go back to the old state. And I found that the voice of reason will ask things like, how's it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Who's going to help you? And all these questions that you can't answer, right? And really the answer is, I don't know. That's what I've noticed for me, is that I've imagined things and they've come into being. And there's just no way I could have devised a means. I could never have figured out to do it that way. Never. And not in a million years could I have figured out that's the way it should be done for my manifestation to come into being. And then once I started to see how beautifully harmonious the means were, and that doesn't mean you're not going to have a rough patch or anything. That just means that the bridge is already finished and you're just going to walk it now. And what I've noticed is that these bridges are very complex, and there are things that I don't think I could have ever sat down and contemplated enough upon and then figured it out. So I had to accept that. I had to accept that I don't have an answer against my own reason. I self-surrendered, as Neville says in this chapter. It's called personal impotence. And I think he says self-surrender is essential. And by that is meant the confession of personal impotence. And then he quotes the Bible here and he says, I can of mine own self do nothing. And that's the outer man speaking. That's the outer man admitting he doesn't know. And I don't know. And I admit that. So I not just admit it, I fully accept that. So now what I've discovered was that type of acceptance of personal impotence, that I can't do anything to make it so, it will just come into being. It will grow by its own kind. That acceptance, I've noticed, is that personal impotence makes acceptance easier to do within myself. That all the inner man can do is accept things within. And the outer man and honestly, or the voice of reason, just has to shut up. We just have to shut the voice up of reason. And it's the amount of power you have when you do it is incredible. When you learn to quiet the mind or quiet reason, and you can fall into a blissful, state. And I do want to stress that you don't necessarily have to always think something or always imagine something. You can really learn to let go in imagination. You don't have to necessarily, always be thinking. You can learn to walk in ways where you're just quieting the mind and you're just observing. And I recommend everyone observe instead of judge reality. There's this idea that these judgments, must ask yourself, where did they come from? Many of the judgments we make upon life were never things we would have thought of ourselves. They're just things that were given to us at one point in our lives. And we took it as truth, and then we judged reality on that. But if we can learn to let go of judgments, be more of an observer, what you'll find is a pattern in your life. You'll observe patterns. You'll observe scenarios that are similar. You will observe your manifestations unfolding if you sort of imagine the things you desire and then become an observer. Definitely in our time, we're totally conditioned to think happiness is a Bugatti. I think that's the most ridiculous thing in the world. To make your own being, your own feelings, dependent upon reason, or dependent even worse upon a physical object like that, then to say I can't feel happiness, I can't feel the things I would desire to feel because I don't physically have it. That's the whole point Neville's trying to get across, is that you don't. You deny the senses. You deny the limitation in front of you. Because we must let go of organ perception. Because if we hold on to organ perception, then we have held on to limitation. Because we know that a Bugatti is not going to just make you happy for the rest of your life. That'd be crazy, right? It's just really a rearranged car. It's the same. It's a bunch of metal rearranged. We view it that way. But to apply this meaning upon it and not see that we're the meaning givers, we're doing ourselves a disservice, because then we don't allow ourselves to feel the things we want because our physical reality hasn't lined up with it yet. And that's the whole point that Neville's trying to say, is that can't you see that the outer man is limited? Can't you see that he looks in front of himself and he just sees a wall? He can't see beyond anything. And William Blake also said it more like he views his eyes as windows. So he was essentially the inner man looking through the eyes. He would say, I would look through my eyes as if I was to look through a window. So when I hear that, I hear William Blake really associate himself with the inner being. And he became that instead of thinking that he's looking with his eyes. Because when you look with your eyes, you see limitation. You look through them, you see expansion. And it's by realizing, or this acceptance of personal impotence, that the outer man can't do it because look how limited he is, then I learned to just realize that it just comes down to acceptance within ourselves. We accept the things we desire within ourselves. And the more you start to learn to accept instead of react in imagination, you start acting in imagination. You start acting with life with a purpose. You start having a purpose in life to go towards those things you desire in your mind and accept them for no matter what they are. And it requires a giving up, a self-surrender, that you don't know the answers to your reason, and just let it go and just fully embrace the desire within you. And you'll find that it really will just come down to that. And it's an acceptance of, you can accept it however you want, but I try to accept everything as something I have now. That's what Neville is trying to get across, that it comes down to accepting in the present. And it's your life will become, or I should say your inner life. That's what we're trying to change, is your entire inner reality. But you can easily change it with acceptance. Who you are inside this world, who you want, or what you want to have inside this world. It's truly your world. And I want to just read the last sentence. Sorry if I'm all over the place here. Just felt like that today. So the last sentence in this chapter, he says, willingly identify yourself with that which you most desire, knowing that it will find expression through you. Yield to the feeling of the wish fulfilled and be consumed as its victim, then rise as the prophet of the law of assumption. Now, when he says that it will find its expression in you, the way I view imagination is that it's the externalizer, that it's the thing that externalizes itself here. So I must go to it if I want to externalize something. And when he says to yield into the feeling of the wish fulfilled, yield is the same word as accept. You yield into it. Neville would say he would fall into states. He would feel like he was falling backwards into it. You can just trust in it or accept. I just use accept. Personally, I find that word to make more sense. And we're accepting that the wish is fulfilled. But I hope this video makes sense. I noticed I was kind of all over the place, but it's fine. It happens sometimes. Hope that helps.